What would you do if you had a medical procedure that wasn't medically necessary and the hospital billed you $10,000 for it anyway? My kitty's in here with me. He was sleeping too good to wake up for this video, but let's go. So this patient goes to the hospital for a cardiac procedure, and they do two. The problem is the two procedures they did are not supposed to be done on the same day, and that's these two right here, because the first one either confirms or rules out the necessity for the second one. And then these other two codes are for contrast for these two procedures. Don't get bogged down in these codes. You don't need to know them. The way I teach this stuff, you don't need to know codes. You don't need to know hardly anything about healthcare. But in addition to that, there was no diagnosis code to substantiate that second procedure. So I go back and forth with the hospital, and I'm telling them, you can't do that. We denied the claim, so what does the hospital do? They bill the patient. You can't bill a patient for a medically unnecessary procedure. But they did it anyway, and the EOB plainly said, denied for medical necessity. Anyway, the patient emails me. She's upset. What are we going to do? We don't have $11,000. We shouldn't be having to pay this $11,000. I said, you're exactly right. Don't panic. I've got it. It's going to take a little while, but just hold on. So I go back and forth to the hospital, and I keep telling them there's no substantiating diagnosis, and those procedures aren't done on the same day. But we did them. We should get paid for them. That's the answer I got from the hospital. I said, no, you shouldn't get paid for them because they weren't medically necessary. So then after a week or so, or two or three, I get this email, and he's going to resubmit the claim. And he says, I won't have a copy of the billing today. It takes 48 hours, but I know the claim was updated with diagnosis code I08.1. Now, I typically try to keep everything in writing, but at this point, I'm just flabbergasted. So I pick up the phone, and when he answers, I said, Cupcake, that's not how this works. I've got the medical records. That diagnosis code is nowhere in the medical records, and you just can't arbitrarily pick a diagnosis code that matches the procedure code to charge $13,000. That's not how this business works. And I shouldn't have told him all that, because I really wanted him to resubmit that claim so I could send it over to a fraud department, but he didn't. I messed with him for a little while. I'd email him every Monday and say, hey, you going to send me that new claim? And he never did. So here's the results from the first test. Clearly states no further ischemic cardiac workup is needed. Plain English, heart scan came back essentially normal. No further cardiac workup needed. Plain terms, first test cleared him. There was no reason to do the second test. So when I argued this point with the hospital, he said, well, we don't have somebody on standby to read these tests to determine whether the second one is needed or not. And I'm like, well, hello. That would be the reason that they aren't done on the same date, because you need the results from the first before you do the second. It's like having the check engine light in your car come on, and you take it in for service, and while they're diagnosing the car, somebody decides that it could be the alternator, so they throw you in a new alternator, and then the diagnostics come back and say your gas cap was loose. That's why your light came on. Well, if you're me, they just gave me a free new alternator because I'm not paying for something that I didn't need to start with. Kind of like the same scenario. They put this guy through another test, used contrast material that he could have had an adverse effect to, and then charged him $13,000 for it. So while we're fighting this fight, they send the patient another bill and said, you're past due, please submit payment in full, or go to collections. A claim in dispute cannot be sent to collections. If you ever get a collections notice on a claim that is in dispute, call the collection agency and say, I want you to explain to me and provide documentation how this is a legitimate charge. They won't be able to do it. It's going to go away quicker than lightning. So finally, on February 27th, I get this email. This is in regarding account, the same one we've been talking about. As discussed, approval was given to adjust the charges in full for the echo, which you had disputed. What's that mean? It means somebody finally was able to think clearly and know you cannot charge for a procedure that is not medically necessary. It has to be medically necessary. Now, I can't do anything about the fact that the poor guy had to go through the test, but I was able to save them $10,000 that otherwise could have sent them to collections. And this is why I do what I do. I emailed the patient. I said, it's finally over. Your account's been cleared. And I get this back. Thank you so much for everything you've done. Yada, yada, yada. $10,000 is not chump change, as we call it down here in the South. And they very well could have wound up in collections. So you need to know how to fight these battles for yourself. Now here's what could have happened had they not called me or somebody like me. The patient could have found a way to pay nearly $10,000 for charges that weren't payable. They could have set up a payment plan to pay charges that weren't payable. They could have been sent to collections for charges that weren't payable. And they could have had a lien taken out on their house for charges that weren't payable. Now, the options once you get a bill like this is you can hire an advocate if you know to do that. And most of them do a pretty good job, but they're going to charge you 25% of savings at least. So you would pay $2,500 to save $10,000 that should have never been billed to start with. So you just had a procedure you didn't need, and it cost you $2,500 to not pay $10,000 that you shouldn't have to pay anyway. The best option is to know to question everything and everybody. If you're going to have a procedure, find out what that procedure is, what procedures, if there's two of them, and do some research. It's easy. I teach that in my course to know whether or not they're medically necessary. There are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of tests ordered every day, that are not medically necessary. I've been doing this for over 30 years. It gets worse every day. So question everything. You can take the course, or you can continue to watch these videos to find out more questions that you need to ask. My goal is to build a big army of people that the hospitals and the healthcare industry are afraid to screw with, like they've been doing for so long. So if you want to fight back, subscribe to this channel. If you've got medical bills coming up, you got procedures you need to have scheduled, you may have one in collections or headed to collections, you can buy the course, go through it. There's not a lot of fluff. It's step by step how to manage just about any situation you run into. If you have any questions, you can always email me. And just join the rebellion. Somebody's got to take a stand, and nobody is going to come save us. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.